So you just got to reach behind your back, grab your controller, and there it is. Welcome to this deck building tutorial. So firstly, to go into deck building mode, you're going to need to take your book out. So you reach behind your back, just where your neck is or where your shoulder blades are, and then just grip your controller and then pull out and you'll have a book in your hand. And now you're in deck building mode. Now you can start putting cards into decks and modifying your decks. So if you take your left hand, put it out in front of you, and then turn it so that the wristwatch on it will face you, then you're going to bring up this menu here, which has your general menu, but more importantly, it has your deck boxes along the bottom here. So once you have your book out, you can take any of these decks, and when you pull it out, it will pop out a whole menu for you to look at. And this has all of the info you'll need to build your deck. Now, starting at the top here, we have some general information about your deck that's going to help you think about strategy later on, but this is going to be more after you've built your first deck. So we can see at the top here, we've got the number of cards in our deck, the number from our primary faction, the number from our secondary faction. So the way that a deck is constructed, you have a primary and a secondary faction. Your primary faction will determine the main ability that you get from that faction as part of your deck, and your secondary faction you can have up to 10 cards from. On top of that, you can also have as many neutrals as you like as well. Then here you can see the number of creatures and the number of spells in your deck, and along here we have those creatures and spells again in their different colours, but shown across the value and cost of those cards across your deck. Then here we have the name of your deck, which you can change as you wish. You have your primary faction, which you can change between the 3 that are available at the moment, your secondary faction, which obviously has to be different to your primary faction, and then there's a few more customizable settings, so you can change the card back, which you can see I've got a few here, so maybe I'll switch this to green, or we'll switch it back to this nice gold one. You also have a deck box, which currently when you go here, there'll only be one deck box. However, if you've reached a certain rank on the season, then you'll have a second deck box available that you can choose from. And also we have pets, which you can pay for with gems, and they'll sit alongside you on the table, helping you and encouraging you as you're fighting. But in this case, we do not have one. Now, the most important part of your deck is here. This is all the contents of your deck, and it shows you each of those cards. And you can see just along the left there, it's also showing me the information about what the card is when I hover over it. It's also telling me how many of each card I have in my deck, and it's all organized by the cost of those cards. Now, if you want to remove a card from your deck, you simply point at it and click. And there you go, now we've only got 2 dutiful servants rather than 3. And if you wish to add a card to your deck, then you need to navigate to it in your book, point at the card, and again, just click. And now that card is in your deck. We can see 1 of 3 necromancies now in there. And once you've finished making your deck, make sure to hit the save button, because you don't want to lose all that progress you've put into that deck. So just click save, and then it will make your deck box disappear. But it's always there, just where you need it, just on your wrist. So I mentioned earlier that choosing your primary faction matters because it determines the ability that comes with your deck. So let's go through what those are. Firstly, we have the Dungeon Master faction. Now, the special ability of the Dungeon Master faction is that there are these cards called Dungeon Masters, which can go into your deck. And each deck has to have 1 Dungeon Master. It cannot have more than 1, and it cannot have 0. And what it is a creature that starts out at the start of the game and has a pretty powerful ability on it. However, that creature's health is also your health. So if it takes damage, you're taking damage. And if it gains health, you're gaining health. So let's talk through what those are. We have the Gunhaunt, we have Celerentier, and then we have Zarathrix. And those are your 3 options for Dungeon Masters. Next, we have the Monsters' Rights Association. Now, their special ability is that you can place a card from your hand, a creature, or a card that specifically says you can do it, into your reserves, which is the little pile just to the right of where your deck is. When you put a card there, you gain 1 mana for the turn, and that's about it. Then it lives in your reserves. And that's important because there's an ability within the MRA faction called Mobilize, which is all about bringing cards from those reserves out onto the battlefield. If you are not playing MRA, you cannot put cards into your reserves by that method of taking a card from your hand and placing it there. You can, however, put some cards into your reserves using some other cards that put cards in your reserves as part of their abilities. And then lastly, we have the Plundering Guild, the new faction, which the special ability of the Plundering Guild is that each turn you will generate 1 coin. Now those coins are used to enhance cards, which is the big deal with Plundering Guild, is a lot of cards you can tap into that coin in order to make them better, and it says on each card how those cards can be enhanced. If you're not playing Plundering Guild as your primary faction, then you're not going to be able to generate coins naturally. However, there are a few cards that will let you generate coins anyway, and then you can use those coins that you've generated with those cards in order to enhance some other cards. And the last thing to know is, if you take a deck out and you go, you know what, we want a nice photo in here, then what you can do is you can go through your book, choose which card you want, point at it, and then press your secondary button to put that card in your deck on the front. It doesn't have to be a card in your deck, but often that's what people will do. And it looks pretty great, especially if it's animated. And there you have it. That's everything you need to know about deck building in Cards and Tankards. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you found it useful. And if you did, make sure to like and subscribe so that more people will see this tutorial as well. And check out my other tutorials too. You'll see them pop up in just a second.